Welcome to the Open Apple Podcast, where we celebrate the Apple II. Whether you're a longtime user, a nostalgic visitor, or a newcomer to the community, join us as we share news and memories of Steve Wozniak's most famous personal computer.
Hello and welcome to Open Apple. This is episode number 39 for September 2014. I'm Quinn Dunkey, your co-hostess with the mostest. And with me as always is Mike McGinnis.
Hello, Quinn. How are you?
I am fabulous. Once again, not Carrington fabulous, but...
well, who is, really?
Yeah, pretty fabulous by my standards. So that'll be 10% less anger and sarcasm this month.
Good to hear from you again. I was, this is your second episode as co-host. There's always a little bit of a voice in the back of my head going, is she going to come back this time? Did we run her off? So I'm glad you're here.
Well, I've got nothing better to do, so.
That's true, yeah.
As soon as I get invited to a better podcast, I'm out of here.
So I think we've got a pretty good episode planned out for everybody. We got an interview with a name that I think everybody will recognize.
Oh, yes.
If you've spent any time at all, especially if you have written any software for the Apple II or the 2GS, you will probably recognize his books. We'll get to him in just a minute, though.
Yes. My fellow coders should be on the edges of their seats right now, because it's going to be amazing.
Get what's new and exciting in retro computing with 2 News.
So we got lots of news to talk about. We had the very meaty wall-to-wall Lawless Legends interview last month, so we didn't get to talk about much news. So we got lots piled up here.
We'll catch up on some of the stuff and, the less interesting things. Not that there's ever anything that's less interesting in the Apple II world, but...
Bite your tongue.
That's right. We'll move through it quickly and on to bigger and better things after that.
Everything Apple II is amazing. Don't forget it. To infinitum. Something. I'm the obnoxious born-again Apple II fan, so I'm all enthusiastic about everything now.
Yeah, how's that going? You've sort of it's been a couple of months now. Has the sheen worn off the golden apple, so to speak?
Well, the paint's almost dry in my shrine. It came out really nice. Got a nice bust of Woz. I carved that out of marble. That took some time. I had to learn sculpture and all that, but
sure, I'm sure.
Yeah. Aside from that, perfectly normal human behavior. Yeah, I know it's going great. I read a bunch of books by someone who we'll be talking to shortly, and I've been doing some programming, and in fact, we'll talk a little bit about that later in the show, I think. So, no end in sight to my enthusiasm for the old stripy apple.
Great. We look forward to the fruits of your labors.
Bump. Well, see, it's because he said fruit. I don't know if our listeners caught that, because...
I'm sure they did. I'm not that subtle, and they're a lot smarter than I am.
Because an apple, yeah, because fruit. So, yeah. So, should we dive in here?
Sure, why not?
So, I guess we should, we almost need a section at this point in the show for Halt and Catch Fire.
Yes, we do.
There seems to be no end of retro goodness to talk about. In fact, I'm sure all the podcasts are talking about it. I know Retro Computing Roundtable has hit on it a couple times. But, recently there's been a couple of notable Apple II cameos on there. Probably my favorite one is, the season 1 is over now. I believe it was 8 episodes, and I think it was episode 7 or 8, where they were they're at Comdex, the big trade show, and they're in one of the hotel rooms hearing a pitch about a printer that these two guys have developed. And it's a funny scene because they're kind of nerdy guys. They don't have they don't have a jobs. It's sort of two Wozes together trying to pitch this. And, the show, I think, is kind of making the point that you need the sales guy and you need the tech guy, or woman, as it were. So they're kind of, it's a funny scene. These two engineers trying to be salespeople. So the printer that they're hawking, I guess, is sort of a improvement over the dot matrix printers of the day, and the prop itself is actually an ImageWriter 2, and they've kind of glued some stuff to it. So it's really quite hilarious, because there's a pretty good close-up of it, and I got a decent screen grab of it, which we'll put in the show notes, because the ImageWriter 2 is such a beautiful industrial design. They sort of had to disguise it as something else, so they glued all this crap to it, and everything they glued to it made it uglier. So it's this it's sort of this craft project. I have to say props to the set dresser, because they managed to track down an ImageWriter 2, which honestly not that easy. So good on them for that. I just realized I made a funny by giving props to the set dressers. See what I did there?
See what you did there.
Yeah. Thank you, Obi. I'm here all week. All right.
I'll edit in some sound effects there, the crowd clapping and stuff. So
man, tough room, man. No laughs for the Mike's fruit joke, and no laughs for that. Could be
crickets.
Yeah, could be crickets because there's nobody else in the room with us.
Maybe so.
We need to do this in front of a live studio audience, clearly.
Oh, goodness, no. That would be awful.
All right, so moving along, the other cameo recently was Cameron, the hotshot programmer woman in the show, says that at one point that she learned to code on an Apple II. It's just sort of a passing remark, but of course, my ears perked up. Let's see, the other one caught my eye. So the machine that they develop in the show is probably loosely based on the Compaq. They call it the Giant, and in one of their big demos, they demonstrate Rocky's boots running on it, which of course is well known to many of us who grew up in schools with the Apple II. That was one of those sort of edutainment type of things that everybody had on their Apple II, and it was a really terrific piece of software. I mean, taught digital logic and problem solving and all in sort of a fun way. And they claimed to be running it on the Giant, and it sort of looked like it, but it was cropped weirdly. So I have a feeling the screen was kind of corrupted. I think it was sort of a like a special effect of some sort. They'd taken a screen possibly from the Apple II version of it, and then kind of cropped it and scaled it and made it monochrome and sort of managed to put it on the screen of this Giant somehow. I don't know. It was very strange, but it didn't. You could tell it was Rocky's boots, but it was sort of a weird corner of a screenshot or something. It was very strange, but
I imagine they just didn't want to make it completely recognizable to people that were watching, because I think by now they've figured out that geeks like us watch this thing and analyze everything that they do.
Oh,
yes. They get emails from angry nerds going, "You did this wrong."
That's right. As we are in fact literally picking this show apart frame by frame on this very show. So we should not be wondering why they might be concerned about people doing that. And the evidence would suggest that people are in fact doing it right this very moment. So let's see. Moving along, I guess we have to mention it, even though it's not an Apple II. But of course, so the show has been progressing forward from 1982-ish or something, and they've reached 1984, I guess, now. And so, of course, the Mac has finally made an appearance. And they did a very strange thing. They had it do this speech synthesis in the demo, which, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was nonsense, right? I mean, that didn't happen. Do you remember?
I don't remember that specific moment of the episode.
Oh, well, but I mean, in the Mac's introduction, I mean, there was no speech, right? I mean,
yes, actually there was.
Was there really?
Yeah, when Jobs pulled it out of the bag and set it on the, he kind of set it on the stand and he turns it on and it does the hello across the screen, and then it gives this speech where it says, "Hello, I would like to introduce." It's this. It's very funny. You can tell that Jobs composed the text because it introduces Jobs as his father figure and stuff like that. And then it makes a joke about not trusting a computer you can't lift up, in reference to like room-sized mainframes.
Right.
But yeah, there was that early kind of robotic Mac speech synthesis was there from the very beginning. I don't know if it's the same samples and the sound that they used in *Halt and Catch Fire*, but yeah. That was one of the key things about the Mac, was that it could talk to you.
I stand corrected. Yeah, I remember it was a big deal that it showed the screenshot that said hello in a little, script, nice cursive writing and so on, because that was sort of such a personal thing when, everyone else's computers just had terminal text style displays. So that was a big deal. But yeah, I didn't remember the speech thing. I thought that maybe that was a sort of dramatization to emphasize how personal and friendly it was. So interesting. I stand corrected.
It's all over YouTube, and we'll definitely have a link to one of the, I guess, better remastered versions of that video on the web. Most of them have faded poorly over time, but
for sure. So, and then the only other thing that caught my eye was, it's not exactly Apple II related, but for some reason, the character of Cameron, the subject of DEC came up at some point, and she pronounced it DEC, which I thought was very strange. And I don't know if the writers didn't correct her or the director didn't correct her, or I don't know. I've never heard anybody call it DEC.
I've actually heard that a lot recently. This is going to be a get off my lawn moment.
As opposed to the rest of this show, which is
right, yeah.
all about youthful.
Well, you and I were around back then, and so you know that Digital Equipment Corporation, you either called it digital or you called it DEC. There was no DEC.
DEC, what is that?
There have been a couple of podcasts by them youngsters where they say DEC, and I think this was a moment of that where maybe those who were either writing it or are proofing the script weren't around, or at least weren't interested in computers at the time and wouldn't have known that this is something that you wouldn't have said DEC.
Right, yeah. Yes, it's probably safe to assume that at least some of the writers on the show were born well after all of these events took place. So, they're gonna want that youthful sort of take on the show, so they're going to hire youthful writers. But, I am also screaming, get off my lawn. It is it is digital or it is DEC. I've never heard anyone call it DEC. All right, so with that very emotionally balanced take on that situation, let's move on. So we do have some actual exciting Apple II news that we should talk about. The first thing that I want to dive into is Dagan Brock has started a video series on programming for the 2GS, and he's put up his first video on YouTube, which we'll have a link to in the show notes. It is just fantastic. I really can't say enough good things about it. The production quality is great. He's got animation, he's got music, he's got, titles, and it's really nicely produced, and it's fun to watch even if you're not just, super into the programming, because it's, he dives right into the eye candy, with a couple of keystrokes. He shows how you can make the 2GS do some really, really neat things. So really looking forward to more of these videos. They are fantastic.
Dagan, for the past couple of years at Kansas Fest, has given these programming the 2GS sessions, and they've always been very popular, and they're very well done. And I think this is sort of an extension of that, making that available to more people, because everybody shows up at Kansas Fest. You either get to see it, and some people video it, but I guess for whatever reason, those videos haven't escaped onto the internet yet. It's great that he's providing sort of the same thing without the requirement of having to travel to Kansas City if you don't want to. I have not watched this new the YouTube video that he's put up yet. So is this something, do you already have to have an understanding of assembly before you get into this, or is this like from the very basics?
No, I would say it's not a tutorial on assembly language for sure. You definitely want to have some grasp of that. Okay. But I would say it's targeted at someone who is interested in low-level programming and has done some, maybe on more modern platforms. Maybe you've written microcontroller code for, Propeller or an Atmel chip, and you're just sort of interested in retro programming. This is kind of the type of place where you could start and sort of explore. I think that's where the real value of it is that I think there's a lot of people out there who would be interested in programming for retro computers. Again, all these people that are writing code for Arduinos and all these different microcontrollers and Raspberry Pis and so on. Those same people would probably really enjoy writing for retro computers, because they're basically, by today's standards, of course, they're basically, embedded microcontrollers, but with cool video and sound and disk drives hanging off of them. So this is the kind of video that someone who's only been exposed to modern platforms could watch and see, it really lowers the barrier to entry for someone, I think, to get into it. So I love seeing stuff like this, because that's what we need, is if we want to get more people writing code for these platforms, this is just the kind of thing we need. So
you see this all the time on the message boards where somebody will post, my dad gave me this 2GS, or I found this on eBay or at a thrift store. What do I do with it?
Yeah.
And a lot of times these are the people that you describe. They're kind of, the programmer types who have a career in programming or have a strong interest in modern platforms and want to explore more. And having these guides out there kind of keeps the interest going in the older platforms.
Yeah, and what's great about Dagan's video is that the barrier to entry is basically zero. If I had made this, I would have probably foolishly, made the first 6 videos about how to install Orca M and, get GSOS running with 68 extensions and whatever else that you might need. So, his video, he turns the machine on and hits reset and types a few keystrokes, and amazing colors happen on the screen. So, it's the barrier to entry is zero. If you buy a 2GS on eBay, you can sit down and do this without even plugging in the floppy drive. So that's what's really great about this. And, because the demo that he shows is fun and colorful, and he makes the GS do a lot of really fun looking things, I think it'll help maybe show what these platforms were capable of, because I think people may not know. Someone who was born, in the 90s or something, grew up not knowing what these machines were actually capable of, might be able to watch that and see, oh, wow, that's really cool. So might stoke some interest there as well.
I found that the guides and the sort of, how-tos that I respond best to, the ones where I come away from it thinking that I've actually learned something that I'm going to remember 10 minutes from now, are the ones where I can get, an immediate tactile response, so like you said, he's putting colors up on the screen immediately, and it's something that you can do immediately at home. There's a JavaScript-based 6502 learning system online. I think it's called Easy 6502, and we'll have the link to that in the show notes as well, where it immediately starts with you typing code into this 6502 emulator and having the response boom right there on the screen. Because if you go back, a lot of these older guides and books, not that there's anything wrong with learning this way, because a lot of people respond as well to that, but they'll start with you, okay, let's learn the basics of binary math and hexadecimal addition and subtraction, which is fundamental and it's important, but it's also really boring. And if you're kind of looking for something that you feel like you can, at least feels like it's easy to take the first few steps, I've found anyway that the method that you're seeing with Degan and with Easy 6502, I respond a lot better to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and those old books were written that way largely because that was sort of the official computer science way to learn this stuff, especially
Yes.
at the time. I mean, yeah, you spend 3 chapters learning what 2's complement is and why it's the best way to represent negative numbers. And, and if you took this stuff in school, like a lot of us did, you spent 2 weeks learning the history of trying to represent negative numbers in binary and why we landed on 2's complement and why it's a big deal and how it's great. But and it's an elegant thing, and you need to know it at some point. But that puts up a big barrier to entry for someone who just wants to play around. No one as a hobby in their spare time is gonna sit down and learn the stuff that way. So while there are lots and lots of great books out there on programming these machines, the barrier to entry on a lot of them is pretty high.
Now, speaking of kind of experiencing the older platform and getting immediate response, you mentioned the Arduino, and there's obviously the Raspberry Pi and things like that. Now, when you were at Kansas Fest, you brought this cool thing along everybody wanted and we couldn't have, darn you.
Yes, I teased you all with my fancy hardware. So I think that was fun to bring that because I think a lot of people don't know that Western Design Center is still alive and kicking, and they still make the 6502, and they're doing really cool new stuff with it as we speak. So, I've been in touch with them a little bit. They had found Veronica, my homebrew 6502 machine, and sort of been in touch with them ever since, back and forth a little bit. And they've been looking for people to try out this new board that they're developing. It doesn't exactly have a name yet. They're sort of calling the whole series of boards the 65XX boards. And for any listeners who weren't at K-Fest or aren't familiar with them, they're basically along the lines of an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi or a BeagleBone, one of those types of things, sort of a standardized embedded system platform that you can build your own homebrew projects on top of. And what sets these boards apart is, of course, they have a 6502 in them, and there's also a 65816 version for the GS snobs out there. I guess the Super Nintendo snobs maybe too. But you're listening to the wrong podcast. So they're smart. They were looking for a hook that would set them apart from the BeagleBone and the Arduino and all the rest. There's a bit of a glut of those sorts of hobbyist development boards out there. And what really sets these apart is that the full address and data bus is exposed in your GPIO headers, and in addition, it's got the full power of memory mapped I/O from the 6502, which is something that these other boards can't do. Most of them are built on like a system on chip or a microcontroller, where the entire sort of von Neumann machine of a computer is inside the die. So your address and data bus and everything are forever trapped inside the chip. You can't ever get access to them. So everything is done through ports on the chip, I/O pins that you can turn on and off and change direction. And you're always going to be limited by that because there's only so many pins on the physical chip. And anyone who's ever developed with an Arduino or similar knows you immediately run out of I/O pins. There's never enough. So just exposing the address and data bus, something the 6502 can do that those other chips can't, is just sort of basically solves that problem, because now you have 65,536 I/O pins if you want, full memory mapped I/O. So in theory, there's very little limit on that. So long story short, there's been some developments. They're nearing production on these boards. They don't have a date yet, but they're going to be posting updates. They have a Facebook page where they'll be posting updates, and they're encouraging people to watch their website, wdc65xx.com. And of course, those links will be in the show notes for updates on that. So they're getting close with them. We'll keep an eye on it.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Actually, I can because I have to. But
yeah. Well, yes.
I want one. And so as I'm looking through our spreadsheet here, I noticed an item that you added. Quinn, and I guess maybe it's best to let you kind of talk about this. This is the DuoDisc 3.5 prototype.
Yeah, so we don't usually talk a lot about eBay stuff. Being a monthly show, it doesn't work super well because, of course, any auction we talk about is long going to be over by the time this show airs. But plus, we just end up getting scooped by Retro Computing Roundtable and the other more frequent podcasts. But
those jerks.
Yeah, shake my fist in your general direction. There's been a couple of really interesting items that went by on eBay recently that just really deserve a mention. One is the DuoDisc 3.5 prototype that went up, and I believe it was Sean Fahey's. I think there's only 3 of these or something in existence, is the rumor. There's been this sort of strange run of items. So one of these DuoDisc 3.5 prototypes came up a few weeks ago on eBay, and it came and went, and it sold for several $100s, I think. And no one was, I think, entirely sure who owned that one, because I think, if I understand correctly, Sean Fahey owns one and Tony Diaz owns one, and there was a third one that was maybe theorized to exist, but no one knew for sure where it was. And we think this is the one that appeared. And for anyone who doesn't know, this is a prototype of 2 3.5-inch drives that would look good sitting next to your GS, and they're stacked on top of each other as opposed to the side-by-side 5 1/4 version. And it's sort of 75% the height of 2 3.5-inch drives stacked up. So that's sort of all one case with 2 drives in it. It's really kind of neat looking. So I guess it came out just a little bit too late. Maybe the GS was already on the downswing and hard drives were already coming in. So maybe it was just a little bit too late. But it's definitely a neat device. And so the second one that came up on eBay, it was listed for $1,000. It did not sell, and I believe that was Sean Fahey's, and I believe that was, I'm sure listeners will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the only one that actually is known to work. I think the others don't. So that was a really cool item, and it was a bit of a shame that I guess it didn't get a buyer, but more neat stuff for Sean Fahey's collection for sure. So. And sort of along those lines again, another crazy rare item came up all at once. There was 2 of these memory expansion boards from Applied Engineering for the Apple IIc Plus. And they come with a matching little daughter board, which is called the DClock, and it's sort of a real-time clock that works in conjunction with this memory expansion. So they sort of the sweet setup back in the day would be to own both of these. The real-time clocks were not that common for the 2C and the 2C Plus, so this was one of the few that you could get. And this DClock is apparently just insanely rare. Apparently, if you Googled them, the only picture you could find of this thing was Sean Fahey's picture of his. Apparently, this thing was so rare that there weren't even any photos of it on the interwebs, and not one but 2 of them passed through eBay recently. So, in fact, actually, as we speak, I don't know exactly when the show is going to air, but as we speak, the second one, the auction, is still running. First one went for north of $700 for the for the set of the RAM expansion and the DClock. So I'm sure the second one will go for the same. I guess there's a couple of big name bidders who will spend anything for rare Apple II items, and apparently the two of them just go at it on every one of these auctions. So, it's very strange that these things that are so rare that no photos of it even exist, and suddenly two of them are on eBay. So it's funny how that goes. So I thought that was worth a mention, even though we don't talk about eBay here.
Yeah. Now speaking of rare Apple IIc appliances or accessories and peripherals and things like that, over on applefritter.com, there is a thread about the something called the C drive and the C keeper. So the C drive was made by a company called Applied Ingenuity, which I imagine they probably were trying to capitalize on applied engineering's popularity.
Yeah, that name is a little suspicious.
Yeah. But they made this thing called the C drive, and what this is it's a replacement for your Apple IIc. It replaces the internal 5.25-inch drive with a SCSI hard drive, but it also has it has a floppy drive of its own as part of the setup, and they weren't in production for very long, and they're very rare. And the poster's name, his username is Jeff Mazer. I'm sure that's his real name. And then there's also something called the C Keeper, which is, and again, this is a board that it plugs into the expansion slot, the plug on your 2C. So you need to have one of the later ROM revisions that can handle it. And it's cut similarly to the ZRAM that Applied Engineering made. And because I don't know that you can fit anything in there that's not cut that way, but it has the clock, and it has, I think it's 1.25 megabytes of RAM on the board, and it also has this RAM saver option. So if you had a 2GS back in the day, you may remember, I think it was called the RAM Keeper or the RAM Saver.
Yeah, RAM Keeper, yeah.
Well, this is sort of a similar thing, but it's for your Apple IIc. And again, this is Applied Ingenuity, and they didn't make very many of them. Well, Jeff has one, and he's got a video of the thing in action that you can watch, and he's got screen dumps of the C Keeper's commands, and definitely neat to check out. Sean Fahey is posted that it looks like they're trying to pressure him to at least ROM dump the thing, which would be awesome if he did that. So we'll have links to the Apple Fritter threads that apply, and it's cool to see stuff like that kind of show up, especially 25, 30 years later. And I don't know why the stuff surfaces now as opposed to earlier, but there it is. Yeah,
this is a really fun read, especially if anyone technically minded. This thing is super, super cool. It's one of those things that it was so bold to even attempt a peripheral like this, and the article is a great read because he goes into all the technical details of it, how it works, and how he interfaced with it. There's sufficient technical detail there that I believe you could actually build one for yourself if you were so inclined. And the guy is justifiably really proud of it. So he's written detailed notes about all the really clever things he did. My favorite was he uses the reset button on the Apple IIc to interact with the device and control it. Cool. He determined that the reset button, when you push it by itself, of course, doesn't normally do anything. You have to press Control or Control and Open Apple with it. He calculated the exact resistor value to create a voltage divider on the keyboard, on the strobe line, so that he can actually detect the difference between a reset and a Control reset or a Control Open Apple reset.
Wow, very cool.
And it's super cool. So you can do all these things with double and triple tapping the reset button to control his devices. It's just super, super clever.
And if you're into home brewing, GG Labs has posted, I guess, open source plans would be the phrase that I would use to build your own 4 meg 2GS RAM cards. From what we can tell, it looks functionally to be a clone of the Applied Engineering GS RAM card. It's over at gglabs.us, and they've got a whole bunch of neat kind of the do-it-yourself projects there and more modern platforms and hardware to play with, but it's kind of cool to see this thing just kind of pop up right there at the top of the list.
Yeah, I'm hoping someone does something similar for the 2C RAM cards, because like we've been talking about them a lot here, but they're a bit of a black art. Only certain models of the original 2C support them, and then the 2C Plus is not. Some of the 2C cards, the earlier ones, are not compatible with the 2C Plus because there was some weird timing issues. There's a tech note on that, and so if you want to get one of these, RAM expansions for any model of 2C, it's a bit of a black art to know exactly whether you can and which one to get, and then to try and find one. So I would love it if someone did something similar for the 2C. Lots of us have the means and desire to make one at home. We just don't know how to do it. Don't have the schematics. So.
But in the meantime, if you want to, you can try your hand at building. They call it the RAM-GS, and they have PDFs that you can download. They include the schematics. There's a Gerber file and the ROM code that you will need to make this thing work in your 2GS.
It's because every GS owner's self-worth is measured by the amount of their RAM expansion, as we all know.
Of course. I
had 1.25 megs back in the day and felt like a pretty big deal at the time.
You were fancy.
That's right. I was queen of the playground.
Again, here's another homebrew project. This is for definitely a more, I'd say, more advanced topics. A few years back, I guess it's been about 5 years now, there was a card introduced called the Carte Blanche for the Apple IIgs, and this was a sort of a blank slate CPLD prototyping board that you could use in your Apple II. It sold out pretty quickly. I think they had a run of, like 50 boards maybe, and I think the hope was that people would use these to come up with hardware projects that they could then turn into products that would be sold to the community. And I don't think that really happened. There definitely were a couple of people who spent a lot of time with the Carte Blanche and came up with some neat stuff. I don't know that ever went any further than that, but it looks like they're now gauging interest in a second run of the Carte Blanche, calling it the Carte Blanche 2. It's going to have plenty of new features. And so if you missed out on the first run, or if you have decided between then and now that you want to try your hand at prototyping projects with the Apple II, you can head over to the CompSys Apple II news group, and there's a thread there. We'll have a link in the show notes, and you can indicate your interest.
Yeah, this is exciting. I mean, CPLDs and FPGAs are really the magic sauce that unlocks all manner of crazy magic with the Apple II, so that we definitely need to get more people playing with these things. Yeah,
as I understand it, you can do things, like if you wanted to, if you wanted to build a USB interface for your keyboard and mouse, theoretically you could do it with this card.
Totally. Yeah. A nice example is the MP3 card from Vince Briel.
Right.
Because what's great about these chips is that they're so fast that you can have them do all of the heavy lifting and just have the Apple II kind of along for the ride and sending little commands back and forth. And there's very little that you probably can't do. You're effectively putting an entire other computer inside your Apple II at that point. So there's really no limit to what you can and can't make it do.
I remember when the first one was announced, I think there was some confusion, and I don't know if it was the way that they rolled it out or what it was specifically, but I'm pretty sure there was, confusion with people who thought that they could plug this into their Apple II and that would automatically give them, I could plug a USB in right now and be good to go. And I don't think that's really what that was. And I think maybe that's why a lot of these cards sold and you didn't really see much, because people got them and went, well, what do I do with this thing?
Yeah, when they first came out, I think I remember that there was a lot of confusion about what exactly it was. I think maybe it might have been aimed at the wrong demographic, because if you target software people or end users, they're not going to know what a CPLD is, and it's a bit of a niche skill set to know how to program one of those, and you've got to know some VHDL or something to sort of get it to do anything. So hopefully they have a little better luck this time.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And I don't know that I'll be signing up for one of these, but
I will be.
No, of course you will. You're somebody who can actually put it to use instead of I would put it in my 2E and go, wow, that's cool, and that would be the end of it.
Yeah. Well, I've been wanting to teach myself actually programmable logic. So this is I took a little bit of it back in school, but this is a great excuse to sort of combine the desire to learn programmable logic with the Apple II quality time. So.
Well, there you go. So all of you out there who have been wanting to get into this and don't know how, wait for Quinn to get hers, buy yours, and then when she starts doing stuff, just bug her.
Good. That's what I need. It's more mail.
Getting back to eBay for just a second, I'm seeing that you scored something kind of cool on eBay.
Oh, how could I have forgotten? Yes, that was supposed to be in my eBay section. So our show notes are train wreck, people. I take all the blame. So, I'm not a big eBayer, and it shows in some of my shopping mistakes that I've made. But this time I really scored. So it turned out well, although I thought it was going to be a disaster. What I picked up was one of the original carrying bags for the 2C. And I love those things. They got the strap and they got the little logo in the corner. And so this is the one with the logo in the lower right, which is, my understanding, is the rarer version of it. You usually see the logo in the top left corner. This is in the lower right. And it's spotlessly clean, which is also hard to find. And the real kicker is that all of the dividers inside are there, which they never are. So, in addition to there's a pair of vertical dividers, one of the compartments also has a cover over it. That cover is just never there. I think it's supposed to be for the power supply because it's got a little hole cut into the corner where maybe the cable would come out. So it looks like you're supposed to be able to put the power supply in there and leave it in there, plug the computer in without removing it. So anyway, it's neat. This one came up, and it came up with quite a high price, as they often do on eBay. These bags, there's always a couple of them on eBay, but they're always, of course, way overpriced because eBay. And but this one had a make an offer button on it. So I threw kind of a lowball offer out there because I figured, what the heck? And it was accepted. So, but that was my first rookie mistake. I didn't realize you get 3 chances to make an offer. So it's sort of like Priceline or something. What I should have lowballed lower because I didn't realize I get 2 more chances to do this. So I tried to pick a price that was low, but I thought had a decent chance of being accepted as well. But yeah, I scored it for about half of what they usually are listed for on eBay, so I was pretty happy with that. But then my second rookie mistake was I didn't check up on the seller. So after I had paid the money, I looked and the seller had 0 feedback. Ooh. And I was like, oh no. Well, that money's gone. But apparently it really was just someone who had never been on eBay before. Oh. And so after a few days, I hadn't seen anything about it having shipped. And that's when I looked at the feedback and thought, okay, well, this is bad. But apparently it just really was that responded to my email and they were like, oh yeah, I'm shipping it. And they were excited that I was actually going to use it for 2C. So I got lucky. It really was just someone new to eBay in this day and age. When does that happen? So, and that same seller has a bunch of other cool Apple II stuff. So,
well, and again, goes back to that age thing. For us, eBay goes back to 98, 99, something like that. Yeah. And most of us have been on it for a significant portion of that time. But there are people younger than us who are in their late teens, early 20s now, and everybody's got to start somewhere at some point. Everybody's going to have 0 feedback.
Yeah,
so it's
true.
It's just good that in your case, it was somebody who actually was honest and wasn't just trying to rip you off. Yeah,
it's true. And again, back to the getting off my lawn portion of the show. It's back in the late 90s, everybody was basically honest and friendly. I mean, in the early days, everybody on eBay was just someone who had some stuff in their garage that they wanted to sell. In fact, at the time, everybody was amazed at how honest everyone was, convinced, this isn't going to work. It's going to be riddled with scams and, this is never going to work. And everyone was amazed at how well it did work. And now eBay's kind of turned into what everyone was afraid it was going to turn into. It's it's riddled with scams. And basically every single listing is a dealer who's trying to, make a profit off something that they bought on Craigslist or elsewhere. So it's very hard to find just that genuine person who just has stuff in their garage they want to sell for a fair price. So. But it does still happen.
Well, I'm glad it was able to reaffirm your faith, even if it was only a little bit.
Yes, I'm very excited. I got the bag.
I'm looking at Google Images right now because I have this distinct memory in my head of an ad for the Apple IIc where there was a woman who had kind of a hat that was down over her eyes, and she was carrying the IIc in the bag. Now, what I'm seeing is her holding the IIc. I'm not seeing the bag ad. So
yes.
Maybe my head is sort of...
I did the exact same thing after I got the bag. I thought, wasn't there an ad for this? And it would be cool. And yeah, I had the same memory. And yes, I found the same thing. I was misremembering that, she's actually just carrying the IIc naked, as it were. But I think that I still do have a vague memory of some ad featuring that bag. Maybe our memories are failing us as we are getting on in years. Well, you are anyway.
Maybe that was... Well, hey. Yeah, this is like a weird podcast version of Picture of Dorian Gray where I age and you don't.
That's right.
And it may be that ad was either used as like, promotional advertising for, the 2C is coming and they don't want to show the product yet. So she's just holding the bag to kind of whet your appetite.
That could be.
Because it's just a bag with an Apple icon on it going, ooh, is that portable?
Yeah.
And I can't find it and it annoys me. And like I said, I think you might be right that I'm just old and misremembering things.
Could be, yeah. Yeah. Well, it gave me a chance to take a cheap shot at you, which I appreciated.
Well, so. at every opportunity.
Yes, the role of Carrington on the show will be played by Quinn.
And Mike will still be played by Mike, absorbing abuse and anger from everyone.
That's right. Mike hates Sponge McGinnis.
Let's see. Ian Drucker. Ian, wow.
Wow. Sorry, Ivan.
I'll just edit that out.
Yeah.
Ivan Drucker has announced that he's updated A2 Server and A2 Cloud again with more juicy, delicious updates for those products. If you use a Raspberry Pi and his cloud server product for your Apple IIc or your other Apple IIs, the details are on A2 Central. We'll have the links in the show notes. I don't think there was anything earth-shaking, but it's always good to have product iterations where things are improving and getting easier to use. So.
Yeah, and despite what Carrington thinks, those products are in fact quite easy to understand and use.
Carrington's a jerk.
He is.
And speaking of Carrington, it looks like you have one-upped his build pipeline.
Yes, I did. Yeah, this is we got all kinds of shots at Carrington here in this episode.
That's right.
So for anyone who doesn't know, at Kansas Fest 2014, Carrington Venston gave a great session on how to get started cross development for the Apple II using Mac OS X. That's again going back to Dagan's videos and similar things. There's this sort of barrier to entry for anyone who's interested in programming these machines. And ironically, what made the machines great in the day was how low the barrier to entry was for programming. You could literally turn the machine on and it would beep at you and you could type 10 print hello and it would print hello. And I mean that the barrier to entry for programming has never been so low since. So, and nowadays it's incredibly high. You have to install 68 gigabytes of tools to even, write a line of code on anything modern. So, we have all these powerful tools for cross-platform development on the Apple II now, but the barrier to entry has, risen to near modern levels because you have to do a bunch of stuff to get it up and running. But it's worth climbing that learning curve because once you have the stuff up and running, it's this incredible force multiplier. Your iteration time. I'm working on a project right now, and my iteration time is seconds on testing builds. So the power of that, when you can, iterate that quickly, is just amazing. Your efficiency and your productivity goes up so high. And so for anyone who remembers programming on the Apple II, you do a lot of rebooting, and so the iteration time was not great, and that really slows you down, especially if you're learning. If you're rusty in 6502 like I am, or if you're new to some of the gorier details of the platform, like I am, you're going to make all the rookie mistakes. You're going to write over the screen holes, and you're going to mix up your BMIs and your BPLs and your BCSs and your BCCs, and so
that's a lot of B's.
Yeah, there's a lot of B's. Yeah, the branches, the 6502 branch instructions are the ones that you want aren't quite there, and all the ones that are there you can use for what you actually want, but it has to be done very sort of cleverly. So, the branch on carry set is sort of like greater than or equal in some cases, depending on if the numbers are signed or unsigned, and depending on what's in the registers and yada yada. So there's a lot of rookie mistakes to make there. So anything that improves your iteration time on building code is huge. So. Point of all of that was that I'm better than Carrington because I took his process and I made it into a one-click process. So, to credit where it's due, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here because Carrington's process made mine possible. So I took what he had done and basically added Xcode, the standard Mac OS X development environment, on top of that. So you can sort of develop your code in, a nice modern IDE with code completion and search, find and replace, and multiple panes and all the good stuff that we like in modern editors. and connected it to Xcode's build pipeline so that you can just hit a key and it will build your code and build a disk image and install the disk image into the drive on Virtual 2 and reboot Virtual 2 or reset it depending, and load your code into a specific place in memory on the Apple II and launch your code. So it does all this stuff with one key. And it does it all very quickly, of course, because it's all emulated. And so the process feels very modern. You write some code, you hit a key, and it builds and runs, and you see the result, and you make some changes, and you hit a key, and it builds and runs, and you see your results. So again, hopefully I can help sort of lower that barrier to entry for anyone who might have a passing interest in developing code for these machines. So I wrote all that up in a snarky blog post, and we will have a link to that in the show notes.
It's 4 keys better than Carrington.
It is 4 keys better. That's what I'm most proud of, really, is that it's,
your crowning achievement.
Yeah, it is 400% better, I like to think. If we were to measure it on an objective scale, I think that's fair.
For those of you who weren't at Kansas Fest, Carrington gave a session where you could do all of these things and you could do it in 5 keystrokes. And it was a dynamic, fun, and interesting session that Quinn just had to go out and squash.
Yeah. It's what I do, crushing the hopes and dreams of others since 1979. 70 something. So, on this subject, this is we're sort of broaching
crushing dreams.
Oh yeah, the subject of crushing dreams and writing code. So we're sort of broaching the idea of a technical segment on OpenApple. We're not sure if listeners might be into that. We don't know how many programmers are out there versus users. So if that is something you're interested in, drop us a line. What's our feedback email, Mike?
I don't know. It's podcast at open-apple.net, or you can tweet at us. That works too. I'm at 6502 Lane. And Quinn, are you on Twitter?
I'm not on Twitter, no.
Okay. So you can tweet at me, and then you can tweet why you don't like me there too.
Yes.
We've discussed, Ken and I had previously discussed on OpenApple possibly doing a tech segment, and we couldn't figure out how to do it in a way that would be useful to people who wanted to learn kind of the deeper level tech stuff that we would want to present, while at the same time not boring to death the other people who are listening, because can't imagine anything worse than me sitting here reading lines of code to you. So if you have interesting or creative ideas in ways that we could present this information to the listeners, we'd love to hear those as well.
For sure, yeah. The real challenge, there may well be interest in it out there in more technical content, but the real challenge, of course, is presenting it in an audio format. That's very difficult, I think, for code. So we'll throw some ideas around and let us know what you all think on the subject. Yeah, and speaking of new segments, we've also talked about doing a little bit more on gaming here on the show.
Return to gaming.
Yeah, so, it's something that has not been around much, but seems like something we should be talking about, just because it's, if we're being honest, probably most of what most people use the Apple II for, both then and now. But we're not going to, we don't want to just sit here and talk about Choplifter and LoadRunner. I mean, whatever, we all know those to death. So we're more interested in possibly some of the more obscure titles or some of the weirder titles. The platform was so huge and so popular that back in the day, it was the default platform that it and the Commodore 64 for games. So if a company was going to sit down and write a game, it was guaranteed to be targeted for definitely the Commodore 64 and probably the Apple II. And a lot of stuff was written on the Apple II and then ported to other platforms, just because the development environment was so much friendlier. If you were a small developer who couldn't afford your own DEC mini computer in the closet, then the Apple II, with its vastly superior disk drives and mini assembler and built-in debugging tools and so on, was such a better choice than the other machines. So point of all that is that there's a lot of really obscure, weird stuff that got written nowadays, a bit like the modern equivalent of digging through the dregs of the App Store on your iPhone. There's 900,000 titles, and there's a lot more than Flappy Bird and Candy Crush out there. There's some very weird stuff if you start digging. So it would be fun to do that same thing for the Apple II. So sort of kick off that segment, I have what I like to call my spite item for the show. My superpower is, in fact, spite, for those of you following along at home.
And angry sarcasm.
Yes, well, and angry sarcasm. I am the chief sarcasm officer of my company.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
I tried to hire someone for the position, but you want something done right, you really got to do it yourself. So I took on that role myself. So over on that other show that you and Carrington do called No Quarter, which for any of our listeners who don't know is all about classic arcade games, and it is a great show. You should listen. You guys talked about Karate Champ, and you managed to get through an entire show about Karate Champ, which is a great arcade game, without ever mentioning the amazing port of Karate Champ to the Apple II GS. And it was called Sensei, and it is just fantastic. It's probably the top 5 best games on the platform. Really well done, and we'll have links to video of gameplay of that, and links to information about it on one of my favorite websites, What is the Apple II GS, which the complete URL for that is long, but we'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. And all the GS listeners in our audience know that site for sure. But so Sensei, what I like about this game is, in addition to just being a great game, it's a great example of one of the sort of main categories of GS software. GS software was sort of broken down into 3 categories. There's a lot of interesting depth there for such a short-lived platform. At the bottom were the crappy ports, right? There was all kinds of crappy ports from other platforms and from 8-bit stuff where they just kind of threw it on the GS, and it's like, well, okay, it's the Apple II, but without the annoying color fringe. The characteristic nostalgic color fringe that we all see, that we're all supposed to officially love. It drove me crazy.
Nice.
So there was tons and tons of that kind of shovelware port stuff. And then there was the middle ground of companies that were, making a decent effort to program for the GS and made some decent looking stuff, the Cinemaware games and some of those types of things. Of course, the issue with the GS is that it's capable of just a whole other level of performance above just showing nice pictures with lots of colors at kind of a crappy frame rate. But to get that extra level of performance out of it, you really have to do some technical acrobatics. And there were very few commercial software companies that were willing to commit to that depth on the platform, either because they didn't have the technical know-how on their staff or because it just wasn't worth the effort. I mean, if you're doing that, the Cinemaware people, for example, they were porting games to Amiga, or they were writing games on the Amiga and porting them, so they weren't going to write all this special code for the GS to make it a little bit better. So there was not very many companies that were willing to go that deep on a single platform as obscure as the GS. But one of those companies was a group called Toolbox, and there was, of course, FTA, who made some sort of forays into shareware games as well, and a couple of other company names that are escaping me. But the bottom line is, if you sort of trace the genealogy of all these companies and demo groups and shareware companies, it's kind of the same 10 people. And they just they moved around and they formed different groups. But this knowledge was sort of so specialized of how to get real performance, graphics performance, especially out of the GS, that there were very few people that knew how to do it. But, as evidenced by games like Sensei, the results are definitely impressive. You've got great full screen, animation effects and great big sprites moving around and, great frame rates. There's other sort of games in the same category would be things like the Gate game, also by Toolbox. There was a demo of a game called Time Lord that never came out, but Time Lord and Gate both had these, huge full screen, smooth scrolling tile maps that were just amazing, all without any kind of hardware acceleration. So this was sort of that other level of software for the GS, and there was just so tantalizingly little of it, and it all came along right at the end of the platform, kind of in the early 90s, some of it as late as, 95. If you want to sort of see what the platform really was capable of, Sensei is a good place to start. The only thing I would say about it is the collision detection is a little off, and the gameplay video that we're going to link to, the player doesn't really know what he's doing. He sort of gets the hang of it at one point, so don't judge the gameplay by what you see in the video. It's the music is fantastic. Some of the artwork is it's a little hit and miss. I think the team at the time, maybe they didn't have the art resources that one might have liked, but it's a technical tour de force for sure. It's a fantastic looking and playing game. So that is sort of hopefully an intro to our new gaming segment. And again, if this is something you guys want to hear more of, let us know at podcast@open-apple.net.
And shame on Carrington for refusing to talk about that during the Open Apple episode, or during the No Quarter episode, even though I insisted that we talk about it.
That's right.
Yeah, that's
I knew you would have, yes.
Because he's not here to say otherwise.
Yes, and I even said after the show was recorded, granted, but I even said, you guys better talk about this on your show. As unreasonable as that demand is going to make, I am still going to make it. So
all Carrington's fault.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And I threatened. I said, well, you guys didn't talk about it, and I've got half of my own show now, so I might just talk about it on this show out of spite. And here we are in the spite segment.
The spiteful game segment. So I did a lot of reading about Sensei after I was roundly chided in the email by a certain podcast co-host. And
I do like to chide.
Like, one of the things that really seems to stand out in the older reviews and even today was how great the sound is in Sensei. Yeah. And we talked in a previous episode about getting a hold of one of the stereo cards, if you can, for the Apple 2GS. To kind of return 2GS's audio to its 2-channel glory instead of the mono that currently comes out of it. And so if you were looking for an excuse to buy one of those cards, this game should give you all the reason in the world, because I downloaded the disc image and played it on my real 2GS, and this thing, it just sounds amazing. So definitely worth checking out.
It really does. I used to just boot it up and leave it on the title screen because that opening sequence is amazeballs. And one of the things I love about the GS is that every decent game had full stereo sound, and even though the machine didn't support it out of the box, and there was certainly add-on cards that unlock that feature of the machine, but all this software was written for a feature that doesn't exist on the original machine, and that never happens. Anytime a machine or a game console or anything has some accessory that they hope lots of people will buy, none of the games support it. It's the chicken and egg problem, right? None of the games support it because, well, nobody's going to buy this thing, or nobody has this thing, and nobody buys this thing because there's no software that supports it. So this is an anomaly. You'd be hard pressed to find GS software that does not support stereo. So if you have a GS and you don't have a stereo card in it, you are missing out.
If you missed out, I don't know if he's still selling the TDX stereo card that he made. If he's not, you can still find him on eBay now and then for fairly cheap. Definitely worth it.
Yes, my GS has the Sonic Blaster in it, and it is awesome.
I am so jealous.
And I got it cranked up. I got 4 speakers, great big old-fashioned wood grain speakers hooked up to it.
Nice.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And when we're doing the gaming thing in the future, for listeners who are looking to contribute, it doesn't just have to be a title suggestion. If you have a great story about your Apple 2GS gaming experience or something that you just want us to talk about on the 2C regarding a game you like, let us know, and we'll see if we can work that into the show too.
For sure, yeah.
But we will not be giving anything away like we used to, just so that, because I'm sure that question will come up.
Yes, and I will run out of items created specifically to spite Carrington, so we are gonna need other suggestions for titles as well. So if you have favorite stuff that nobody else seems to have heard of that was your favorite game, feel free, send it on over. We'll talk about it.
If you're looking for that old school dial-up BBS experience, and I'm not talking about just the Telnet version of it, although you can do that too. Level 29 BBS is now a bulletin board system that you can actually dial into on your modem. If you stop by bbs.foztex, that's with 2 Z's and 2 X's.com, you can learn all about it. And if you don't have your old modem anymore, it doesn't work, or you've long since disconnected your landline, you can still Telnet in as well.
Yeah, this is fun. I signed into it, and I was immediately told that it was busy and I should try again later. And I retried for several minutes and never got in. And it was exactly like a BBS in that way. It was it was great. I remember many hours with the auto redialer.
Yeah, unfortunately back then you had your list of the favorite BBSs that you could call around to, and if one was busy, you could call another and hope you could get back to the one you missed. I think this is probably a pretty unique experience these days. You can dial in at 300, 1200, or 2400 BPS, so blazing speed there.
Yeah.
The phone number is 415-672-1024, and these days, long distance is a far cry from what it used to be. If you didn't live in San Francisco, back then you either had to obtain a free way to call them, to call long distance, or you were stuck dialing locally. So, but these days, I think most calling plans include free or very, very inexpensive long distance calling. And if you don't want to call in, you can telnet right in. Just telnet to bbs.foztex.com, port 9600.
Yeah, long distance BBSing back in the day was much like getting married. You needed something old and something new and something borrowed and, oh yes, something blue.
Something blue.
Yes. Yeah, I was in Canada at the time in a small city, and there was really only one or two BBSs that you could dial into, and so there was really no choice but to sit there dialing hours and hours at a time, because there was thousands of Apple II users who all wanted to get into that same BBS, so there was no other way. But and there were we used to have there was some subscription services that people would set up where we would all pitch into a fund to pay the long distance bills to dial American BBSs, because that's where all the good stuff was, so to speak. And so we would join these kind of collectives, if you will, where we would all pitch in, and then someone would dial into an American BBS and spend all of our money on long distance, downloading all of whether it was the FidoNet feeds or the Usenet groups or the, shall we say, shareware and freeware software that was all legally obtained from those services.
Mm-hmm, sure.
And would sort of burn through the pot of money that we'd all contributed and then distribute it locally back up in our little city in Canada. So it was a good system, but you definitely needed patience in those days. I mean, the hours of redialing to get in, and then if you wanted to download anything, it was more hours, and just even browsing through the message boards was so slow. And I think it's easy to forget how patient you had to be a BBSer.
It seems almost incomprehensible today, but it wasn't so long ago that most of these BBSs were, it's just a computer in some guy's house,
Mm-hmm.
and he might have two lines if you were lucky, one that he could call out on, and one that you could call into on the bulletin board system. And if the lady down the street was dialed in, you had to wait until she was done. And then you had to get, kind of lucky enough to be next in line to happen to call in. Yeah. And, some people got smart about it, and they would go out and they'd buy these auto dial things that would just keep trying the numbers over and over again, or you'd have the software, which I think was a little bit slower if you did it that way. And those people were really unfair, because they would just kind of jump right to the head of the line there. Yeah. But it wasn't until like the larger kind of dial-up services like CompuServe and the Source and things like that, and the ones that came before, that used Mustang multi-line software and stuff, and they would go out and they'd buy banks of phone lines, and those were, subscription services, and they had to be because they couldn't afford all those phone lines on their own. If you didn't want to buy into that, you were stuck kind of dialing around and hoping that you got a free line.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, it's funny, now that we have all this historical information about BBSs online, it's awesome to look at the pictures of people's BBS setups. I love that about Jason Scott's documentary and places like Level 29, because he has photos of his setup and stuff that, at the time, I think I first was on BBSs, I think I was, 11 or 12 years old or something. And, they were just sort of these mystical, far off things that you were dialing into. And you imagined, war games-esque fancy machines with blinking lights and clean rooms and whatever, and all this magical software being served. And it was just, they were all someone's desk in the corner of their bedroom, piled up with dusty, scungy old equipment and cables hanging from the ceiling and stealing power from the neighbor's outlet next door. And just they were just always these sad looking, but much loved. Yeah, sad's the wrong word. More like lovingly jury-rigged, let's say, setups. Of mismatched gear and whatever could be scrounged up. It's amazing how little money these systems were run on and how influential they were. They definitely punched above their weight class as far as the amount of hardware and the money that was in them, and compared to the cultural impact that they had on all of us.
And now you can relive those days of dialing and getting a busy signal over and over again.
That's
with
right.
The level 29 BBS.
That's right. Yes, you too can experience the joy of the auto redialer.
That's
for 6 hours.
Oh. And I guess we can wrap it up with a bit of gaming news, since we talked about that segment a little while ago. This is less specific to the Apple II, but Quinn, you put this on the spreadsheet, so you talk about it.
Yeah, actually, I don't think I did, but I'll talk about it anyway. So, Activision has been making noise that they're bringing back the Sierra brand, or Sierra Online, as some of us knew it, or Online Systems, as some of us knew it, in its various incarnations. They're being a little, as of this broadcast, they're being a little cagey still about what exactly that means. Most likely it's just sort of in the Atari sense of it, the brand, someone, they're just going to slap it on some software and see what happens. I would not expect a reimagining of great old hits or anything like that, but it's still neat to see the pedigree. Hopefully they'll bring back the logo and we'll see it on something. I think it's obviously going to be, PC only, but, it's tangentially related, so we're talking about it.
And I think that pretty much brings us to the end of the news segment, and let's get into the interview.
Hi, this is Steve Wozniak, and you're listening to Open Apple.
Okay, so this month on Open Apple, we have a special guest interview. The name Gary B. Little probably means a lot to Apple II fans out there. If you don't know him from his extensive book collection, then you might know him from his days as editor and author at A+. He worked at Apple for a number of years, and he's here to talk to us today. Hello, Gary.
Well, hello there. How are you guys doing?
Doing well, thank you. Quinn, I'm sure you have a question for Gary.
Yeah. So Gary, I guess the first question people always want to ask is why did you buy an Apple II? Back in those days, there was all manner of choices. There was Ataris and Commodores and PCs, oh my. So what was it that brought you to the Apple II?
Wow, what a great question. Well, this was 1978, so I just completed a master's degree in chemistry, of all things. And that got me into computing, believe it or not. At the University of BC, they had an IBM 370 mainframe, and we had to do a lot of numerical analysis. So I basically really got into computer programming through that, and I ended up rewriting a lot of the libraries that we used, etc. Personal computers had just come out, so I went shopping, and my brother, who was an electrical engineer at the time, I asked his advice, and we sort of sat down and talked about the various options, and I think I picked the Apple II because, first of all, it was expandable. I figured, well, maybe I'll use this one slot, maybe. And it was in color, and it was, price was high, but what else is new? And anyway, in any event, I ended up buying the Apple II and didn't really regret it at all. I think the other option at the time was the CompuColor. I remember looking at it. I didn't buy it, obviously, but I don't think they lasted very long. So it was nice to pick a winner.
Yeah, no argument here. So most of our listeners probably know you from your books, Inside the Apple IIe and Inside the Apple IIc. And in fact, I actually literally just finished reading Inside the Apple IIc. I'm starting a programming project on the IIc, and so I've been reading various books, and yours was on the list. What prompted you to write those?
Well, I don't know. I just started, I was really into the Apple II right away. I mean, I sort of rolled up my shirt sleeves and started learning how to program it, because I never had a formal class in programming ever. Everything I've done is based on self-education. So, I started writing little articles for magazines. I think my first article appeared in Micro. Do you remember Micro, the 6502 journal?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And my first article there, I think, appeared in 1983 or something, a long time ago. And they actually paid me for it. I mean, that was, wow, I got $50 or something. And I went, maybe I can make a little money here. So I ended up writing a few articles here and there for various magazines, including Micro and I think Soft Talk, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, there was 3 or 4 that I wrote for. And then I said to myself, well, gee, maybe I could write a book. And at the time, Peter Norton was pretty famous. He'd written a book called Inside the IBM PC. So that's just the background at the time. So anyway, I pitched a book idea to several book publishers just on, using the Apple II and how to expand it using the game port and things like that. One publisher came back to me. It was Brady Books, division of Prentice Hall, I think. The book editor, God bless me, says, well, why don't you come down to San Francisco and we can talk about it? Well, of course, he's paying, so I went, great, I'll be there. I've never been, so I flew to San Francisco, stayed there for a couple of days, and the editor, Chris Williams is his name, by the way, he took me to the top of the Mark Hopkins. It's right at the top of Nob Hill in San Francisco, and fantastic view. He was just buttering me up, obviously. And, they were the publishers of the Norton book, Inside the IBM PC, which is a huge seller for them. And so he said, oh, forget the book proposal you made, Gary. We'd love you to write a book called Inside the Apple IIe. That would be a great complement to the Inside series that they thought they had going here. So that's what I did. I signed that deal on the spot that day on the top of the Mark Hopkins in San Francisco. The big surprise that day was he says, well, you tell you what, we'll do your book too. So we'll do a 2-book deal today. And so I went home, flew home, back to Vancouver at the time, with a 2-book deal in my pocket, with a nice advance, and off I went. And I'd never written a book before, so that was, of course, the challenging part. But
they don't need to know that, right?
Well, they probably did know it, but in any event, that's how I ended up writing Inside the Apple IIe. And the funny story is that I think I ended up writing 6 books. But I never wrote that one that I'd proposed. It never happened. I wrote Inside the Apple IIe, and then the Apple IIc came out, and so I wrote that one, which was very similar to the first book, which looks like you've been reading recently. And then I wrote a book on ProDOS, and gee, I wish I had my list with me, but I wrote a couple of books on the Mac as well. But I never ended up writing that very first book.
So what I really liked about Inside the 2C is that I read it and I read the Apple's, Apple IIc technical reference manual back to back. What I like about your book is that it's basically the same information, but sort of written by a normal human being. So it's a lot easier to absorb. Was that intentional? Did you want it to have a similar sort of degree of content or structure? How did you approach the structure of the book?
Basically, it was meant to be very usable and informal, so to speak, although I'm very detail-oriented, so anything in that book should be right. But I wrote it in a friendlier style, I hope, and just sort of laid it out so that the information was there for anyone to easily find and enjoy, and including myself, to be able to quickly find stuff. So that's always been my approach. I still do a little writing, nothing on computing lately, but that's my style. Make things more approachable, make it fun to read, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, and there's still great resources today, as you've heard, that people are still actively developing software. In fact, it's on a bit of an upswing at the moment. So it's great to sort of still have those books. So, 20 years or plus later, are there any sort of erratas that you have that you know of for those books? Are there things you'd want to say to modern readers who might be trying to use them today to develop for the Apple II?
They're perfect. There's no errors in either book. If I had an errata, I'd give it to you. There probably are a few glitches here and there, but it was more like 30 years ago. So,
give or take. Who's counting?
And there's probably a few little gotchas here and there, but probably not too many. I was pretty meticulous way back then. Even now, I'm infamous. People know me because I'm always looking for typos on street signs and stuff like that. It's just one of my little things. Yeah, no, I had no idea that there was so much activity in the Apple II area still. Although just a few weeks ago, somebody sent me the entire source code for ProDOS and DOS 3.3 and I think SOS. Official Apple source code listings. I have no idea where they came from, but somebody had them, and so I've put them into my archive. God knows why, but I've got them. At the time, of course, you guys probably did this, Bob Sander-Cederloff was the guy to go to get source code listings for these things. He made bit of a career out of publishing them in a serialized manner over several months. I think it was the entire source code for DOS 3.3 as he disassembled it and annotated it. Pretty amazing stuff. And yeah, thank God for that, because I was able to write, let me think about this for a minute. Well, he must have done ProDOS as well, because I think I used his information to help find places to put my code for this thing called AmDOS, which was something I wrote. It allows you to use, AmDOS stands for Amateur Disk Operating System, and it was gave you the ability to run DOS 3.3 on a 3.5-inch floppy disk.
Before we move on, I've got Amazon actually has a list of all the titles that you published over the years, and the other one that I see coming up a lot, and I guess you'd call it the hobbyist community these days, would be exploring the Apple IIgs. It looks like you were with the Apple II kind of all the way through the entire line, because obviously the 2GS and the 2C Plus were the last ones made. Yeah, and I wrote a book on GSOS too. That was exploring Apple GSOS and ProDOS 8.
Right. Yeah. So those two were I moved to California in 1987. I think those books must have come out right around that time. So I think I was just finishing those up as I was either going to California or just in California. And then I joined Apple in '88, and I think the Apple II lasted for another probably 4 years, maybe. You guys probably know better than I when it stopped manufacturing, but it was probably early '90s sometime. By that time, I was sort of focusing or getting into the Macintosh more, and I wrote a couple of books, 2 books on the Macintosh early on, the assembly.
I know that you also had published in A Plus magazine a couple of articles, and then as I was reading about that, I came across that you were actually the editor there for a while.
Well, that's how I ended up in California to begin with. So the story is, when my ProDOS book came out, which was the third book, I guess, I started thinking, well, I should get it serialized, make some money here. And so I pitched it to the usual suspects, probably Insider and A+. Anyway, A+, Fred Davis at A+, liked the idea. And so A+ started serializing that book. So I probably had 3 articles about ProDOS in A+, and then they liked my writing, and so they ended up starting to just feed me all sorts of story ideas, and I ended up writing many, many cover stories for them on, reviews of software or hardware or whatever. I was establishing quite a name for myself, and then when they had a need for a technical editor, they gave me a call, and they said, I think we could convince you to move to California. And I said, I don't know, that might be difficult. We'll pay for all the moving expenses. And I went, yeah. So I ended up moving to California to be the technical editor at A+, and I it's kind of awkward, but I was only there for a year, or just less than a year, and then Apple came knocking on the door. At that time, Apple was really hiring a lot of editor types, not necessarily for editing jobs at Apple, but they hired Dave Zatella, and they hired myself, and Ron Lichty, and Dave Eyes, and all these people that have written books or were magazine people. Lisa Raleigh, who worked with me at A+, she was hired as well. It was quite an era at the time. This is like '88. That's how I ended up at Apple. So
well, and when Apple's on the line, you always take the call, right?
Well, you never know.
You're not gonna turn that down.
No, I guess not. Yeah, it worked out pretty well.
So were you at A+ during the merger with Insider, or was that after your time?
That was after my time. So I left in, June '88, I think it was, or May. And I think the Insider, it must have been the next year, something like that. But, the slippery slope had begun, of course, for the Apple II in terms of, the big-time magazines. We had a circulation of over 100,000, but it was declining, I guess, starting in '89 or so. So Insider, merged, and then ultimately that basically all fell apart at some point. And that's sort of the timeline there. I still have the old copies of A+ that I edited.
Now, you were at Apple, you said, for 10 years. That's quite a long time. What kind of things did they have you doing there?
Well, I actually ended up working with David Eyes and Ron Lichty and others in the development tools product marketing group. So we were responsible for making sure that there was an adequate supply of development tools for both the Apple II and the Macintosh. And so I was sort of, I did a variety of things, but one of the things I did was sort of be the evangelist for getting third parties to write, compilers and debuggers and that sort of thing. There's some Apple II related stuff, but a lot of Macintosh stuff. Obviously, I work with the Fortran guys and the COBOL guys and the assembler guys and Steve Jasik's debugger, that kind of thing. Did that for a while, and I did other things there too. I was the product manager for Mac App for a brief time, and also I was the Java product manager for a year or so. So I stayed in the development tools group for basically the entire 10 years, even though it may not have been called that formally, but it was that kind of job. And about 10 years later, 98, yes, Apple was on the ropes, as you guys know. I was a non-green card. No, hang on. I had a visa to work in the U.S. I was very concerned anyway that Apple went through hiring stages, but also layoff stages. And I was very concerned that if I ever got into the layoff stage, I might have to come back to Canada on somebody else's schedule. And I didn't really want to do that. So I was a little bit concerned. So I ended up, when I got a job offer from another company, which turned out to be Sun Microsystems, I decided to take it. I just didn't know. It was too uncertain for the family, So I sort of regret I didn't stick it out longer at Apple. I could have, I'm sure, in retrospect, but at the time it seemed like a pretty good idea.
Yeah, I don't think you missed much there. Those were the dark years for Apple when they were making Performas and Lord knows what else.
Yeah.
And I definitely sympathize as a Canadian working in the U.S. having that H-1B axe hanging over your head.
Yeah, the H-1B, yeah, exactly. Well, I did get my green card eventually, so that was nice. But anyway, that's a completely different topic, which we'd best not get into.
Now, in addition to all the writing that you've done with the books and the magazine and articles, there's also a few very interesting pieces of software. And I guess I'd like to start with Binary 2. How did that come about?
Well, I'm really still intrigued by data communications and so on, and I got into computer bulletin boards early on, and I wrote this software called Modem Magic or Modem Magician that was published by Call Apple in Seattle and others. Pinpoint Publishing picked up a version of it too. And it was all about, talking to community bulletin board systems and transferring files back and forth. And of course, just like on the Macintosh, the problem was that it wasn't just the data that was in the file that was important. It was, some other attributes. And unless you had those other attributes to go with the data, you sort of lost the context for the file, and it was difficult to use it at the other end. So on the Macintosh side, someone had created something called, I guess it was called Mac Binary, and that solved the problem there. So I felt that obviously we needed something similar for the Apple II, particularly when ProDOS came out, and I created the thing called Mac Binary, Mac Binary, Binary 2, which was basically Mac Binary for the Apple II, and it allowed you to do the same thing, basically transfer any type of file from one Apple II to another, and you could use it at the other end just as if it were you installed it from the floppy disk that you bought it from. So I wrote it up, and Apple turned it into an official tech note. And I guess it was used by most of the data communication software of the day, not just my own, but others. And it worked out pretty well. Solved a real problem of the day.
It did indeed. In fact, I noticed in addition to that tech note, it looks like it was blessed with an official ProDOS file type. How did that come about? Did Apple call you up one day and say, hey, we want to make this official, or?
Well, you know what? I think at the time when they actually turned it into a tech note, I actually worked at Apple. So it was I did all the work before I came to Apple, and then that was all done afterwards. And I happen to know the guys that wrote the tech note, so I probably had a little influence on them to do that. And I think Matt Deathers wrote the tech note, as I recall. So yeah, it was kind of nice to get an official file type code for it, for sure.
This is obviously going back 30 years, so maybe it's faded a little bit, but do you remember any sort of programming challenges that you kind of run into when you're trying to come up with a solution to a problem like that? Or is it just a breeze that you wrote in an afternoon?
No, it's hard. Everything's hard. Well, especially for me, I'm very finicky, and even today when I'm writing software, because I write a lot of software now, I wouldn't say it's for fun, but I'm kind of into Google Maps, so I'm writing a lot of PHP and JavaScript to overlay Google Maps, and you're always running into all sorts of programming issues or problems, or you don't fully understand what's going on, and so you've got to sort of understand that first before you can solve the problem. And that sort of is not never ending. In the old days of the Apple II, you had to understand the system first. Thank God we had the Red Book, which had the source listing of the ROM, or part of it. That helped a lot. And then you had to find places to put the software. So page 3 was the favorite spot, but there was only probably 200 bytes to work with there. So you had to get really good at compressing code. And so, you'd be working on that too. And there's all sorts of problems. I remember when I got into communication software, oh my God, the timing issues were horrible. If you sent a pause key to a Hayes micromodem, it would take it 3 seconds to react to it. You had to have code. I called the code the straggler code. So even if you sent the pause command, you still had to sort of loop for a while to make sure you picked up 2 or 3 stragglers that were coming over the line, and so you didn't miss them. Yeah, there's always something you were learning, and it was a challenge all the time. I did a lot of software. I wrote a lot of different kind of software, and all had its little problems here and there, but I think I sorted out most of the problems.
Is this what led you to point-to-point?
Yeah, point-to-point was sort of the deluxe version of all this communication software I'd written 2 or 3 years earlier. I think it was called Modem Magic, and then I licensed it to Call Apple, and they called it Modem Magician. And then when Call Apple sort of faded out, or I got the rights back or something, I kept working on the software for my own enjoyment and use. I still do that today. I decided to see if I can get it licensed again, and I approached Pinpoint Publishing, who did, you guys will recall, all this cookbook software, and a bunch of other things too. They were in Emeryville. We were just kicking around ideas. They were up for it, and we were kicking around some ideas on the name. And I don't know. I think I came up with Point to Point, and they loved it because it sort of fit in with their company name, Pinpoint Publishing. So it became Point to Point. They sold it for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years. So made a few bucks off them. And then when they decided to go off on other things, I think, I licensed it to Beagle Brothers. Unbelievable.
Everybody's favorite publisher.
Well, they were fun guys. And anyway, that was fun too. But, by that time, things weren't selling quite as well as they used to.
So that's interesting that, so Point-to-Point and Modem Magician were sort of the same package then?
Well, they looked a lot different, but they were basically versions of one another. I kept improving it and, obviously changing the interface slightly. It sort of had the look of AppleWorks type of thing. But it was basically the same underlying code that I kept refining and improving over the years. So.
Okay, that's interesting because there's an old Call Apple article where they sort of do a head-to-head of various modem and communication software, and they sort of compare those two to each other as part of the roundup. So it's sort of
Is
funny.
that right?
It's almost like it's almost like they don't know they're the same piece of software.
Well,
or something.
That's kind of odd, actually. You wouldn't have thought that they'd both be on the market at the same time. I don't recall that, but hey, who knows? They're selling old stock, maybe. I don't know.
So that it must have been really challenging to write communication software on a machine with no real-time clock. How did you sort of coordinate communication with different machines without being able to timestamp things and so on?
Basically, just working through the existing modem cards, the Hayes micromodem and the Novation AppleCat modem and all that stuff. And to a degree, it was simply sending data to that board and it would take care of all the transmission, and I didn't have to worry so much about time and date stamps at all. So it's sort of in the distant past here. I'm trying to remember how I really dealt with it. But it wasn't a big issue. It was pretty simplified in those days, of course. So.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that was also the sort of the Wild West of protocols. There was, Apple had their own sort of faster version of things, and was there challenges there associated with all the different competing standards and so on before, or was this after sort of when the Hayes AT command set sort of took over? Or
there were boards that you put in your Apple that didn't even use the AT command set, so I was trying to support all those. As I recall, I was trying to use the chip directly to send data in and out. And I probably I think I had a driver that would actually use the AT command set, but they were all slightly different. It was just driving you nuts because the AT command set was extended and everybody had a slightly different version, so you sort of had to go to the lowest common denominator and just leave it at that. I tried to support everything, of course, and like I said, there were non-AT modem boards that you could plug in that I supported them all, or I tried. Some of them I could never get to work. The 1200 baud Novation AppleCat. Talk to me some other century, and I'll tell you how to use that one. I mean, by then I'll have it figured out. But no, it was really hard, and I could never get it to work. But I got most everything else working. I supported multiple clock boards, too, by talking right to the clock chip on these boards. So I sort of got my code written so that I could just, it's like a driver overload or overlay, and you pull out, you just had a little place with a jump table, and you just replace the code and put the jump table back, and you'd have a new clock board supported, just like that. You learn a lot.
Those AppleCat modems were a bit notorious, honestly. I mean, they were so poorly supported because they were so difficult to support, I think.
Yeah.
So speaking of difficult challenges, so you wrote AmDOS, so-called amateur DOS. That's a really interesting thing. I mean, so for our listeners who may not be familiar with it, it was a way to use the Unidisc 3.5-inch discs in DOS 3.3. So aside from the sort of technical stunt impressiveness of it, what prompted you to sit down and write that?
It was a nice programming challenge. I got to be honest. Man, I got that thing to fit into page 3 somehow, and with 1 byte to spare, and it was a real challenge, and it worked like a hot damn. It was great, and then I sold it as shareware. Shareware was big in those days, and man, I used to get $30 checks all the time from right around the world. It was incredible. I wouldn't say I got rich off it, but it was kind of nice to get $30 US checks and cash them in Canada. At the time, it was a good premium. So, but it was fun. And I'll tell you, when I worked at Apple, there was a couple of people that used to contact the Apple licensing department about something similar. And the legal department would always send a little note over to me saying, yeah, you might want to talk to these guys. They might want to license your software. I don't think it actually ever worked out, but still, anyways, it really started as a programming challenge. And, I just like a challenge. And it was challenging to get all that functionality out of basically a couple hundred bytes of code. It may have been just more than page 3. I may have jammed it into some other empty spot that Bob had pointed out in the mainline area. But I may have the source code for it somewhere. I mean, if I do have it, it's on a 3.5-inch Mac disk probably at this point.
That is interesting that it just started as a challenge, because the description of it almost sounds like, well, I wonder if I can make Far Cry run on a washing machine. It doesn't sound like, to me, something that I would immediately necessarily want. It's like, well, if I'm going to use 3.5-inch discs, I'll just use ProDOS. But then at the end of the day, it sounds like a lot of people, it was filling a need, right? You got a lot of people sending you checks for it. So clearly people were really into it.
Yeah, I think DOS 3.3 lasted a long time beyond ProDOS, and it was very effective. And of course, the old floppies only took 140K, was it? So anyway, it did fill a need for sure, definitely.
Yeah, it's very true. There were DOS 3.3 holdouts all the way to the end. In fact, at Kansas Fest, you get to talk to those people who are in one camp or the other. Personally, I always really liked ProDOS, and as soon as it came along, I switched. But there was some hardcore DOS 3.3ers to the end.
How dare you?
Yeah. Well, I got to admit, I love ProDOS, but I don't know. I just wrote AmDOS. Like I said, it was fun to write. Turned into a bit of a revenue generator too, which was surprising. And of course, the name, I just love the name AmDOS. Nobody knows what it's amateur DOS disk operating system, as opposed to the professional disk operating system.
Right.
Hey, I just having a little fun with it. But there were others too. I mean, I wasn't the only one that had done this. I think there was a couple other people that had done something similar. But I'll bet I got it in fewer bytes.
Woz would be proud.
Yes, exactly.
One of the things that I've done recently that I've been doing, my interest in the hobby has led me to do is I've been doing a lot of scanning of old magazines and books. And I came across a copy of Inside the Apple IIe once on eBay, and it was somebody wanted like $150 for it. And I said, this cannot stand. And so I pulled out my copy and ran it across the scanner and posted it. And as I was, I think just maybe a week or two ago, I saw that you had actually noticed that, and I think you posted the cover of it on your Pinterest page, and I I wasn't sure how that was going to go because most people are okay with it, because it's 30 years ago and they're not making any money from the stuff anymore. But every now and then I'll get somebody that says, could you take that down, please? That really bothers me that you did that. So here's me officially asking for your permission to host those files that I've had up on my site for a couple of years now.
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
Great.
You know what? It was funny because you did a lot. There's value in that work. So I downloaded the book too.
Oh, great.
So I have an offline or an online copy of it too. So that's great. Yeah. It saves me severing the binding on my copy and starting to do the PDF on it. Yeah, no, that was it was fun to sort of see it was done. And I think you did. Did you do the other two as well? The 2C, I think?
Yeah, I did the 2E book and the 2C book. I think somebody else did the 2GS book at one point. I just know that I know that the 2E book was one of the ones that, going back to the heyday of the Apple II, was always really popular. You would read about it in magazines, and it would get great reviews, and everybody would refer to that book as reference reading, and you got to get this. And so 30 years later, it wasn't available anymore except at these crazy prices, and so it just felt like kind of let's put this out there, and so that's what I did.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it, and I think I only have one copy of the real book myself. I had multiple copies, and I schlepped them around between countries for a long time. I went, who am I ever going to give these to? So I kept a couple maybe, and the rest are long gone. So anyway, it's kind of nice to see. And just parenthetically, it's funny. I was up on the web the other day, and hey, I found my 1977 chemistry thesis online. I couldn't believe that. So I downloaded that quickly too because, I have the printed copy, obviously, but it was, again, very handy to have the scanned copy of the original document. So thanks for that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and the community thanks you too. I can attest as a modern programmer who's recently gone back to the Apple II. I hadn't read the book back in the day, and by that point I was into the 2GS. Although I'll say that your book, Exploring the 2GS, was actually the first third-party programming book that I ever owned, and that sort of got me into programming the 2GS.
Yeah, cool.
So,
all right.
So now when I wanted to go back and get back into the 8-bit stuff, I picked up the 2C book actually from Mike's site, and
Yay.
yeah. And I certainly would have paid cash money for it if there was any way to do so these days, but yeah, and honestly, it's just as good now as it was then, sort of as a way to, if someone wants to start programming the Apple II and doesn't know where to start, which is basically where I was, that's a book you can pick up and read. And assuming, you have some basic assembly language knowledge.
Of course,
it's sort of a great sort of way to figure out, okay, well, how do I get characters on the screen, and where does ProDOS load itself into, and all that sort of basic stuff that you need to know before you can even write a line of assembly code on the Apple II. So
amazing to think it's still got a life after 30 years. I don't even know where you buy an Apple IIc anymore. They're probably around on eBay, but they must be kind of rare.
Quinn.
Yeah, I can speak to that as well. So the basic 2Cs are not too bad on eBay. They made enough of them that they're still around. The 2C Plus definitely goes for a little more money. And the best way to get one is to come to Kansas Fest, and people are selling and trading them and so on. But the prices on eBay, they're a little crazy sometimes for some of the models. Depends on the model. But the ones that they made a lot of, your basic 2E and your basic 2C, you can still pick one up on eBay for $40.
Yeah, I haven't had the Apple II for years. A friend of mine kept his. He's got number 92. He lives in the North Vancouver area. Anyway, his number 92 is interesting. It's, I don't know what color it is now, but it doesn't have any vent holes cut into the side. Oh, wow,
he's got one of those.
Really old
wow.
ones, yeah.
I've never seen any other computer Apple II with no vent holes. I'm sure they made a few, but not very many.
Yeah, the first 100 or so of those don't have those holes. And in fact, Bob Bishop, who was he started the R&D lab at Apple with Woz and was there early on. He had, I think, number 13, and he would run in his Apple II and just leave it on, and it would come back, and the plastic was actually sagging because it got so hot in there.
That's a rare model, I would think.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Very. Yeah, and those go for real money on eBay for sure. If your friend needs a retirement plan, that might be it.
Okay, well, Archie, if you're listening, just keep that in mind.
So, sort of on that subject, do you have any interest these days in the Apple II? Do you have any interest in picking one up again and playing with it?
Not so much. I'd love to have one, just to have it, right? I might just hang it on the wall or something. No real interest in the 8-bit computing days. These days, if I'm doing any programming, it's, as I mentioned earlier, I'm sort of I collect old maps, and so I like everything about maps, and so I ended up learning how to program Google Maps, and so I do a lot of interactive map programming, which of course is cross-platform. Although I'm doing all my development on a MacBook Pro and I have my iPad by my side and my iPhone, so it's sort of got an Apple flavor to it, but it certainly works best on a Mac, as they say. But I really haven't felt any need to get back into the 8-bit stuff for the Apple II, I'm afraid. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. That's allowed.
I do enjoy talking about it, though.
Yeah. You just described my desk to a T, actually. I have the same setup. If you are ever interested, the same setup actually works great for Apple II development. Nowadays we have really great tools, something that the community has done, since in the interim 30 years, is built a great set of tools. We have emulators and compilers and libraries and, build pipelines and things that we couldn't possibly have dreamed of in those days. So, development for the platform is just orders of magnitude easier than it used to be.
Okay,
so
good.
Kind of a fun little hobby. But
if you find a bug in Modem Magic, let me know and I'll fix it.
You might get a sternly worded email someday.
Well, if I find the source code, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, honestly, the communication stuff, that's one area where it's a little tough because, the infrastructure for that stuff no longer exists. We don't have landlines and modems and BBSs and things to use that stuff with, unfortunately. But there are some people sort of dedicating themselves to recreating some pieces of that environment, but it's definitely an area that's harder to revisit, unfortunately. Okay.
I'll send you my source code for InfoSearch, which is a database program I wrote a long time ago.
All right. There we go.
It's funny. I wrote that database program. It was pretty quick, really fast, most of it in assembly language. And I remember very well in 1984, a couple of friends of mine bought Macs, and they were, I don't know what the Mac database program of the day was, but it was probably some Microsoft thing. But anyway, I remember them saying, "Oh God, your Apple II database program is so much faster than the one on the Mac that I'm using." And I went, "Yeah, that's probably because it's finely tuned assembly language. It performs every trick in the book to get the extra performance out. And the Mac version was probably written in some higher level language and bloated a bit even then."
Yeah, I used to have the same conversations in the late 80s with my friends that had Macs, and I had my 2GS, and frankly, the 2GS was better in virtually every way than some of those early Macs. I'm sure we'll get hate mail for that, but...
Well, it's kind of incredible that the Mac survived that first 5 years, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah, I think it survived through sheer force of Steve Jobs' will, honestly, because...
a lot of loyal customers, too, obviously.
Yeah.
But nowadays, of course, it's the thing to have.
So, Mike, other questions, or?
No, I think we covered it pretty well. Gary, is there anything that we missed or that you'd like to add?
No, I think we covered most of it. I can't believe I talked about AmDOS and InfoSearch and Modem Magic and point-to-point and all those old books and so on. Amazing.
Well, thank you for coming on and spending some time with us.
Yeah, we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I enjoyed every second of it, so I appreciate the call. It was great fun.
Awesome.
All right, thanks, Gary.
Talk to you guys later. Bye.
So again, Quinn, thank you for podcasting with me.
Well, thank you, Mike, for tolerating my relentless sarcasm and
tolerating. It's all I think about when we're not recording. Is how is she going to rip into me next time?
Well, every day that Mike goes home crying is a good day in Quinn Dunkey's book, let me say.
And when Quinn's not at it, you can send your hate mail right there.
That's right. And thanks to Gary for being with us today. It was great to have him on the show.
Yeah, that was a great interview. I thought that went really well.
It did indeed. And as I said in the interview, I'm reading his books right now because I'm working on some stuff. We'll talk more about that later. Yes, secret projects.
All right, everybody. We'll talk to you next month.
Bye, everybody.
has been the Open Apple Podcast. Find more episodes, read our blog, or send feedback by visiting us on the web at www.open-apple.net.
To infinitum, something, something.